Right, welcome everyone. We're gonna learn about frequency masking today. So we've already had a chat about it and I defined it and understood the concept. So I'm just gonna get straight into how to locate it and how to solve it. So let's head over to our assessment. So the promises mix, and I'm gonna jump straight into a section that's probably one of the busiest sections of the song. So the most chance for frequency masking to occur. So let's have a listen. So my drums are sounding nice and clear when I turn them on and off. And the secret to locating it, if you didn't realize, was just turning the locator on and off. So my drums were sounding nice and clear then, they weren't sounding blurry. And they weren't getting in the way of too much else. But have a listen to the relationship between the leads and the bass line, and tell me if the bass line becomes clearer when I turn the leads off. The answer is yes, and that's because there are frequencies of these leads that are blocking the frequencies or in the way of the frequencies of the bass line. All those nice mids there are getting in the way of the mids of our bass line. So that's the problem. Frequencies getting in the way of each other, and remember, it's when they're playing at the same time in the same space with the same frequencies. So this wouldn't be a problem if it was a vocal, for example, or maybe even better yet, like the drums, because they're so high above those mids. So we find the problem by turning our track activators or the mute switches on and off. And when we turn the problem off, the track should just open up and become a lot clearer. And that's what I found was happening there with the bass line. So my problem is in the lead somewhere, one of these guys. And I'm going to say it's this one, the up. That's correct. So there are actually a couple of ways to navigate frequency masking. And funnily enough, EQ is the last one of them. So we'll talk about this more in class as well. But the very first one you should think about is arrangement. So like the classic call and response, is there a way that you can get one instrument playing when the other one stops? And that's a good example of what we've done here with the vocal, pretty much. Because otherwise there would be even more frequency clashing between the vocal and the lead. So we stopped the vocal and the lead started playing. So that's a good example of where arrangement can help you before you're even mixing to get clarity and less frequency masking in your mix. The next is transposing. Probably best done with drums because you can pitch drums up and down by a couple of semitones, say 3 semitones. And the timbre will just slightly change, but again, that drum might just slip into a new frequency pocket and become really easy to hear. A classic example here is like an offbeat shaker that you would have, and maybe the 16th groove. Now they're already sounding good, so the shaker's a little lower than the 16th, so you can hear it. But if the shaker was higher, the shaker becomes a little bit harder to hear. And so this is an example of where you can see by playing with pitch, we can give each instrument its frequency pocket and make it a little bit easier to hear. So pitch is great on basically non-tuned or non-harmonic melodic instruments, but it can also work on the classic case of the lead, which is down in the mids. or which is basically an octave too low. So obviously with tuned or melodic instruments, we'll only be able to work in octaves or maybe fifths, but especially when it's not your arrangement as well, something you'll have to talk about with the artist. But let's see what happens when I pitch the lead up 12 semitones. So let me know if all of a sudden the lead, the bass line, the track becomes a bit clearer. So yeah, however the lead sounding might not be to taste, but we're definitely getting it out of that frequency range of the bass line, getting it up an octave, probably where the lead should be anyway. And if not, what that means is we should write another bass line around this lead, if this lead is the king. But for me, the bass line in this track is the king, so I've decided to change the lead to give the bass line those mid frequencies to breathe. So we've got arrangement, transposing. Now panning, which is something we've already covered, is an even better solution as well. If you're feeling like the arrangement's right and each instrument is in its right octave, obviously you can't play these too high or too low, violins and, for example, things like this, then just putting it in a different space. Okay, so even putting the arp just all the way to the left, or a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right. And we'll go through a technique in a few weeks to bring the arp completely to the sides, which is also another good trick for lots of high frequency, exciting sounds like these chords and arps, to get them out of the middle and onto the sides so that those frequencies aren't overlapping. Let's just have a listen. Probably wouldn't mix it like this, but you'll get the idea that by getting it happening in a different space, again, we get rid of that frequency masking. All right, and that is frequency masking.